Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is just a quick overview of the equalization application, and then we're going to talk about the MS1 submission as well as the MS1 extension. So we'll first talk about what's changing in 2020. We'll talk about how to data enter your MS1. We'll talk about how to upload your MS1 data from your CAMA if your CAMA provides an export. And then we'll talk about how to finalize and send your values to the state. So what is new for 2020? There are two things. The small one is the electric energy storage system exemption. So that's RSA 7285 if you've adopted it. That is now part of the optional exemption reporting. And the big one is there's revised reporting for your utility values. So you used to just report your municipal assessed value for the utility. DRA is still asking for that. That's that bottom value, the total assessed value, which is required. So that is still the most important number, is your total assessed value. And that is what will be used for equalization and tax rates and all of the rest. They have added in 4 other delineations of value. So they're asking for your distribution value that you valued per RSA 728D. So that's that new formula to value distribution assets. Then if there are any distribution assets that you did not value with the formula, what is the value of those? And then finally, what is the value of the generation assets and what is the value of the transmission assets if they have both? So those 4 pieces of value are optional this year, as DRA acknowledges we're in a strange year, and the ability for CAMA providers to accommodate all of this might be not the best this year. So those 4 are not required this year. The total assessed value is required. So if you aren't able to make that delineation between the different pieces of value, that is okay this year. You can just report the total assessed value as you always have. So how does the MS1 process work? So on the far left here, it doesn't necessarily begin with an extension, although there's been a lot this year. So you can request an extension of your MS1 filing. Either way, whether you request an extension or not, there are 2 paths that you can go. That upper path there, you can do manual data entry, so just log in and do your data entry of the MS1, or you can upload a data file from your CAMA provider. I'm positive Avatar has a data file. I'm not sure if the other CAMA providers have done it. So if you want to go with the data file, you simply export that out of your CAMA and upload into the system. There is a utilities matching step, which we'll take a look at. Either way, whether you do the data upload or you do manual data entry, once you have done that, it does validation checks. So make sure that all of your required fields are filled out and checks any calculations, which we'll look at in the system. Once you pass the validation checks, you'll move on to the submission. And this is an e-file submission. So the submission is 2 parts. The first part is you e-file within the system, so you click submit. The second part is you print out a copy of your MS1 and get it signed by your assessing officials. So for towns, that would be your select board, and for cities, your board of assessors or your assessor. And the reason that is a 2-step process is there isn't a good way in New Hampshire law for one person to file on behalf of a board of people. So the best way we came up with was you e-file, your data goes to DRA, they can begin the review. But before the data is finalized, they will be looking to see that your elected officials, either your board of assessors or your select board, have reviewed that MS1 at one of their meetings and signed. So as soon as you get that done, submit it, print off, and then get that on the agenda to be reviewed by your assessing officials. One other caveat between these two methods is you cannot do the data upload once you've started doing data entry. You can delete what you've done on data entry and decide to do a data upload instead, but you can't start doing data entry and then augment that with a data upload. And we'll take a look at that in the system. So a little bit about MS1 data entry. So what you do is simply log into equalization, which is at ratiostudy.org. If you do not have a login, you can send an email to our support desk, which we'll see the email for that at the end. And we do require that that email come from someone at the town domain. So it would have to be a municipal email account requesting access. If you are a contractor for the town, we'll need somebody from the town to send us an email requesting that you have access to that town. So you log into equalization, navigate to the MS1 tab, and then click continue to begin. So once you do that, you'll be on a screen that looks like this. There's many tabs. I'll walk through them in a moment. But down at the bottom, you have your main controls. You have your save and home button, which will save all of your data and then bring you back to the MS1 homepage. You have save and recalculate, which will save your data and recalculate all of the math in the form. You have your submit button, which does much as it sounds like, submit to the MS1. And you have view your MS1 report, which will get you the printable version. So those controls are down at the bottom of the screen. So I'm just going to switch over here. Bear with me for a moment. To my application. So all I've done is logged in here. I would be at my home screen. If you have access to multiple towns, if you're a contractor, you'll have your towns available up here, as well as your prior equalization years. So the tabs go across the top, correspond to what you see here, and this kind of just explains the tabs to you. So we've got our verification tab, which this is where you verify your sales and link your CAMA records for ratio studies and equalizations. You've got questions, ratio studies, reports, etc. And down here at the bottom, we've got your MS1. So this is clicking continue here is exactly the same as clicking the tab up here. So we'll go to the MS1. You will see all of the towns that you have available to you. For most people, that's just one if you work in one town. You will also see any village districts that you have associated with your account. And you notice next to the village district, you have the town that it's associated with. Particularly useful if you have multiple towns. So we're going to use Merrimack here as our example, and this is our test server, so none of this data is real. So we could start our MS1 here for Merrimack, that would be data entry, or we could upload that XML file that we get out of our CAMA. So those are the two ways to begin. You'll notice some of these don't have the upload button because we have started. So once you've started one way, you've got to kind of stick with it. You can, however, delete it and start over with the upload if you wanted to. So let's just hit on the extension request. So we've got our extension column right here. So if you need to request an extension, the MS1 is due September 1st. So if you're not able to submit it by September 1st, you do have to file for extension. So you just select the reason that you're requesting the extension, put in the requested extension date, so when you want to submit it, and then just give a brief explanation and click submit. And you can do multiple extensions. So if you extend to October 1st and you can no longer make that date, you can extend to October 15th. So you can do this multiple times if you need to, but it is important that you file this if you're unable to make the September 1st due date, because this gives DRA the ability to prioritize for tax rate settings and know when they can expect these MS1s to come in so that they can proceed with tax rate setting. One other thing I want to highlight while we're here, you'll notice these blue question marks are throughout this part of the application. So you'll see them all over. If I go in to start my MS1, so this is the beginning of the data entry, you'll see them on almost every screen. We'll have these little blue question mark. So if you click on this, this will take you to specific help about that section. So if you do have questions, you can click on the little question mark there, and that will give you help about that section. So just walking through the MS1 quickly here, pretty big form. So we have our utility section. who appraises your utility. If it's DRA, fine. If not, who, and then you add who appraises it with the add line. Couple of other questions. Then you have your actual reporting. I'm going to switch that off. You have your actual reporting. So you would add your electric companies, pick your company. Here are our new columns. This is the one that's required, your total assessed value. So this is what you've always been submitting. That is the most important value. And you'll be able to see DRA's value if they've set it. So same thing for gas, water, and other utilities. If we navigate into credits and exemptions, you have your veterans credits. So you would enter the amount of the credit that you've adopted, and there's your range, the number of individuals that you're giving the credit to, and your estimated tax credit, and the maximum allowed would be the amount times the number of individuals, and you can't go over that. So that is one of the checks, that your estimated credit is not greater than the maximum that you can grant based on the number of the credit and the number of individuals. So those are all of the veterans credits. You have your disabled and deaf, both of which have income and asset limits. So this would be the income limit for a single person and the asset limit for a single person, and likewise for married for both disabled and deaf. We have our elderly credits and exemptions. So we have the reporting of our first-time filers for the current tax year by age category. Then we have a reporting of the total number of individuals that were granted the exemption by age category. Then the amount per individual, total actual, which can't exceed your maximum. And again, your income and asset limits for your elderly exemption. Then we have our other exemptions and credits. So you just have to indicate whether you've adopted these. These are the newest here down at the bottom. If you indicate that you have adopted, this is the commercial industrial construction exemption. So just put the number of properties, the percent assessed value, and the total exemption granted. And if you haven't adopted this, you don't have to worry about this at all. Just click no, and you can move right along. So then we have our property reports. So this is breaking down the value. So here is your reporting of current use properties, reporting of the monies that you received for land use change tax, your conservation restriction assessment reports, your discretionary easement reports, discretionary preservation easement, your farm structures, your TIFs, if you have a TIF, and only, I think about 20 communities have TIFs, tax increment finance districts. If you don't have them, you don't have to worry about this section at all. If you do, you can add in your TIFs, the district name, when you adopted it. And the folks that have TIFs know what all of this is about. The rest of you don't need to worry about it. You can also upload any files that are related to your TIF. And this is more of a service than it is DRA's requirement. There had been some comments that the documents that establish the TIF aren't always readily accessible in town if the assessor leaves or what have you. And there's also typically a spreadsheet that is used to calculate the increment based on how the TIF was formed. So those documents can be attached here. Just for record keeping, DRA doesn't require it and doesn't review them, but if you want to have someplace centrally where that stuff is kept, so if there is any staff change, you can add that here and just have a central place for that to be. Finally, we have our payment in lieu of taxes. So if you do have any PILTs, you can record them here for state and federal forest, White Mountain, and then any other. There's two types of other payment in lieu of taxes. You can report those there. Going into our summary, you report who your assessor is. Then you list your municipal officials. So this is where you list the people that will be signing the form. This will appear on the front of the form. So you would list your select board members, your board of assessors, whoever is functioning as the assessing officials. Here is your reporting of your land. And some of these are pulling from other areas. You see they're grayed out because we reported all of these in other areas already. And some of them are reported here. So your res, your commercial, industrial, and tax exempt are reported here. You have your acres, current and previous year, and the difference, and your assessed value, current and previous year, and the difference. So this is exactly what DRA looks at to see that everything looks reasonable. Obviously, these do not look reasonable. We have a pretty big difference because I haven't entered anything. So that's one of the checks that they do just to check that the values are trending in a reasonable manner. And nothing was left out inadvertently. So then you have your building values, your utilities and timber, and this is pulled from the utility section. You have your exemptions here. So these are your disabled veterans, deaf, etc. You have your optional exemptions that you can adopt, and here's our new one, the electric energy storage systems. So you can enter the values here if you have adopted it. And finally, our totals. So this gives you a breakdown of everything on the form, and you can see which values are used for what. So this is used for the county tax rate. You have to remove that commercial industrial construction exemption if you've adopted it. That's used for the local education and municipal rates. And then removing the utilities and the TIFs gets you to your state ed rate. So this will show you which values are going to be used for each of the rates. You also have notes here. So if there is anything unusual, maybe you got a big new payment in lieu of taxes or a payment in lieu of taxes expired, anything that's largely different, it's helpful to just put in a note here. That way when DRA is reviewing it, they don't call you to ask if you forgot to include your payment in lieu. So this is a helpful place to just log any notes that you want to get to DRA. And again, down at the bottom, we have our save and home, save and recalculate, and our MS1 report. We'll check out the report now. So this is taking a minute to load here. So the important thing about the report is you'll see as it pops up, it's pretty heavily draft watermarked. And that is intentional. Until you submit it, it says draft all over it. And this means this is not what you want to have your assessing official sign. You see, I've got no municipal official showing here because I didn't enter any. So once you submit the form, this draft watermark will go away. And that is the version that you want to have your assessing official sign. That lets everybody know that it's been submitted. These values are locked in the system and you're signing exactly what's in the system. So if we move through the report, this looks very much like the old MS1 paper PDF report. So this should be very familiar to everybody. You can export it out to a number of different formats. PDF is the best for printing, but you can also go out to Excel or Word. Some people like to editorialize some of the lines, which you can do if you export it out to Word. So we just exported that out to PDF, and here we have our PDF. So this is the best for printing. But again, you can go out to Excel or Word if you'd like. So let me get out of that, and I'm going to switch back over to the presentation for a moment, just to talk about data upload. So if you do have a CAMA system that supports the XML data upload, you would export that out of your CAMA and upload that into the system. And again, this is only available if you have not started data entry. Once you upload your values from CAMA, you can certainly edit them, but if you've already begun data entry, you'll have to delete that filing and start a new one with an upload for it to work. You can't augment data entry with an upload. So once you upload the file, you get a couple of checks. Our top line is, does the XML file town name match the town that you're trying to upload it in? So we see here, we're in Barnstead and trying to upload Bridgewater. So it gives us our red exclamation point there saying, it's not looking good. This looks like this is the wrong town. Then down at the second section, we have our utility mapping. So on the left-hand side, we have the utility companies as DRA knows them. And then we have our uploaded name. So that's what the XML file says. So if they match, as they do here, life is good. We get green check marks, good to go. If they do not, you'll have to use that drop down on the left to pick the correct utility. So you're essentially mapping what you call the utility to what DRA calls the utility. And if you do upload and they don't match, it would save you time next year if you update the utility name in your CAMA system to match what DRA calls it, and that way you won't have to align it again. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go, I'll do a save and home. And notice I can't do the XML upload because I already started my data entry. So I'm just going to delete that since we didn't really do anything. And now I'm going to upload my MS1 data. So we'll navigate to the file. We will upload it. So what this is doing is extracting all the data. It says, hey, you're uploading this from Merrimack. Your file says it's from Merrimack. That's good. All of my utility names match across all my utilities. If they did not, you simply select from the dropdown and pick the utility that corresponds here. Once you do that, we can apply the upload. And now if I go in, it has seeded all of that information and basically filled out my MS1 for me. So we have all of our utilities, we have all of our credits and exemptions are all populated. So this really gives a big shortcut if your CAMA does support that. So one last topic here before we open it for questions, and that is submission. So once you are done with your MS1, you click the submit button. It's going to ask you to put in your information as the preparer and check the checkbox for e-file, to the best of your knowledge, this is true and correct. And again, this is just the e-file. So DRA will have that once you do it, but you do need to print out the report and have your assessing officials sign that, and that will be the final. So you can scan and upload that signature page right in the application once you've submitted it. And again, DRA will not move forward with tax rates until you have that signature page. So it's important that once you do the e-file, you get that queued up for signature as quickly as you can. So let's take a look at submission here. So if I try to submit, it's going to do all of the checks. So it's checking all of the math for the exemptions to make sure you're not exceeding the maximum amount. It's also checking to make sure that all of your required fields are filled out. And it will do that tab by tab. So we made it all the way through these tabs. And we got to the last section here. It told us you have to fill out the assessor's information. So let's do that and click submit again. And now it's going to run through all those checks again. If it finds something else, it will just bring up the next issue, and it will keep going through them until you've addressed all of them. So we've addressed them all now. You do your e-file, just put in your first name, last name, phone number, and email. Click the checkbox, and then you're good to submit it. And remember that will then, you'll need to go in and print out your copy for signature, which is right there. So we'll go save and home, and I'll show you where the upload is. It'll be right here, your signed copy. This will turn into a button once you've submitted it. And once you have uploaded it, you'll be able to view it or delete it if you upload the wrong thing, and then you can upload it again. And likewise for your village districts, if you have any, they file an MS1V, which is just a pretty heavily reduced version of the MS1. It's much shorter. So just a couple more slides here, and we'll open it up for questions. So again, just reviewing, that draft watermark will be there on the MS1 report until you submit it, then it will go away. There is that blue question mark icon, which will give you help for individual sections. There's also the help button in the top left, which takes you to our knowledge base, which does have a lot of good information, including recordings of these training sessions. And just to wrap up, there are some resources available to you. DRA has some information on their website. Again, that help button takes you to a lot of good information. And then you have two avenues for actual help with a live person. You have your equalization auditors at DRA. So that is Natalie Duffy, Cindy, and Linda Kennedy. And you have our Axiomatic tech support, and contact info is there. We're available via email, telephone, or you can submit tickets directly down at the bottom. So how do you decide who to call for help? So call Axiomatic if you know what you want to do, but you can't seem to do it. For example, you forgot your password, you can't log in, something doesn't seem to be working right. So you can call Axiomatic tech support for that. If you don't know what you should be doing, for example, you're getting a payment in lieu of taxes, you don't know how to classify it and which of the 3 types you should be reporting it under, that would be calling DRA. So if you have questions about statutes or how you should be reporting something and where to report it, those would be questions for DRA.